Hey, this is Alpha for Shock's video guide, and today we're going to be taking a quick look at how to defend against Zergling and Roach pressure when one is opening with a very fast triple Stargate into expansion in the Zerg versus Protoss matchup, or rather Protoss versus Zerg matchup. Now, the idea of the 3 Stargate opening, which has been covered in another video, so if you haven't seen that, go take a look. The build is essentially the same. The idea of it is to get a very fast third in order to pump out a lot of Stargate units and eventually get up to that Colossus Void Ray ball that's so powerful. And the way this is done is off of just one gateway and several very early Stargates. Now, it can be very difficult to actually take a third base if the Zerg player calls your bluff and actually tries to deny it, because all you're really going to have is a very low number of gateway units combined with several Void Rays. And while Void Rays are great, they don't really kill Zerglings and Roaches super fast. So you could still end up having your expansion denied. So we're actually going to be taking a look at how to really try and play out this style. Now we see that we've spawned on Whirlwind, and in the bottom left corner we have the red Zerg Peppo, and his opponent in the bottom right corner we have the blue Protoss Believe. And these positions actually are pretty interesting. Close air positions on Whirlwind is very good for Stargate play, obviously. Drop play like Warp Prisms. It's also pretty good for any sort of early pushes because the distance is actually quite small, and the positioning of third bases favors the player on the right. This third base is the one that you would normally like to take, but obviously you wouldn't take this because it's in the direction of your opponent, so you got to take this one. But this one is kind of in an awkward sort of position. There's like a really huge arc that it can be accessed from, whereas this, there's a very narrow ramp here, and then this side is right near your base, whereas this one, this ramp is kind of near your base but not really. Anyhow, we see that both players opening out pretty standard so far. Looks like Believe is actually going to get that pylon block down, but no matter, Peppo's going to get the third base up here as his natural. So we do see that Believe is going for a Nexus first Forge Expand of some kind. So that's very normal in the Protoss versus Zerg matchup. He's going to be taking those gas geysers, and again, basically at this point in the game, both players are just trying to get their economy going. We see that Peppo's taking his third base now, the third hatchery rather, and he's putting that down at his natural, just a little bit after 4 minutes. So he's definitely looking to play a macro game, an economic game. Now we see that Believe's Nexus is finishing up, and both of the gas geysers in his main has been taken. We also see the gateway is now finished, so we should expect a Cybernetics core to come down. There it is. And of course, there's really no way for the Zerg player to read this right now. I mean, it's just a Forge Fast Expand with 2 gases in the main base. And as for Believe, I mean, based on his vision, he knows that there's a base here, so this is obviously not some sort of 2 base all in, or else, unless it's a really meta kind of all in. Now we do see that Peppo just continuing to pump out the drones right now, hasn't taken his gases yet. We're approaching the 5-minute 30-second mark, and both players right now are basically just building workers. And that's, not that rare in this matchup, particularly on a map like Whirlwind where there are just so many bases available. You don't have to fear that you're not going to be able to get like a 4th base or something, because there are bases all over the place and it takes a really long time to mine out. Now we do see that, these hatcheries are starting to get some saturation. They all have queens. Meanwhile, at Believe's side of things, Cybernetics core is finished, Stalker being chrono boosted out, and he's starting to stockpile a lot of gas. He's got about 300 gas, which is quite a bit, obviously, and he's going to have to put down some sort of tech. There we go. There's the first Stargate, around 6 minutes and 30 seconds. So that's, not that early, not particularly late. He knows that the Zerg player isn't going for some sort of really early 2-base all-in, so it seems pretty safe. But it is going to get scouted by this Overlord, which is very well timed and well positioned by the Zerg player to send it up here so that it can come in like that. So at this point, I mean, you get your Stargate scouted, and really, what's your move from here? Some players would actually abandon the Stargate. We do see that Believe is actually going to take his natural gases now, and both of them put 3 guys on immediately. So that's, pretty early. And what he's going to do now is he's going to add 2 additional Stargates. So it's important that you only add the 2 additional Stargates once the Overlord has been, dealt with. You don't want the Zerg player to immediately see you putting down these extra Stargates. It's not the end of the world if the Zerg player does scout it eventually, but you would rather it doesn't happen right at the beginning, or else you could get like blind countered. Well, not really blind, but you could get countered really, really hard, by a very, very fast Hydralisk Den, or like some really, really strong just spam of units. Now, if we take a look at our Zerg player, we do see that Zergling speed is on the way. We do see for the Protoss player, Mothership Core is coming out. Pretty late Mothership Core, but not really a problem given that, the Zerg player was not going for any sort of pressure or anything like that. Now, we see that the Protoss player is moving out to take his 3rd base here, and it's around like the 8-minute and 30-second mark. And the Void Rays are starting to come out now from these Stargates, which are taking up quite a bit of minerals, delaying the 3rd a little bit. That's really optional, but I believe the reason that the Protoss player is doing this is mostly because there seem to be quite a few Zerglings out on the map, and he wants to make sure that he goes for, at least some units, so that he doesn't get caught, unawares if these lings are part of, larger force that's getting produced. You see the Zerg player is taking more gases, which is, very normal. These are actually quite late gases. He's also getting a macro hatch, and there are spores everywhere. And the Protoss player obviously would expect this when he knows that his Stargate gets scouted. Obviously, you would expect the Zerg player is going to throw down a lot of spores. At each of his bases, he's going to throw down spores. So it's really not worth rallying a Void Ray all the way over to the Zerg player's base. It's just going to end up taking damage and not really doing anything. But it is important to note that the robotics facility for the Protoss player is pretty early with respect to the gateways. We went 3 Stargates, okay, and then we added this Robo, and we also added 2 gateways. We did not add the 2 gateways and then the Robo. The Robo is essential. The gateways, obviously, you need gateway units to fight. You need an army. But the reason the Robo needs to be early, or like as fast as possible, is because you really need to get Colossus Tech as fast as possible. Because Zerg player, when they see Stargate, and even in this matchup in general, Zerg players usually go Ling Roach into Hydralisk. And if they see you in Stargate, then they'll definitely want to be going for that Hydralisk. So getting that fast robotics bay as quickly as possible is pretty much essential. Now, okay, we see that Believe, is basically up to, a decent number of Void Rays, a lot of them being produced still. And the Zerg player is producing quite a swell of units. He's getting a lot of Roaches, 13 in production. He's getting some Zerglings on the way. He's kind of seems to have halted drone production for now. And he's just going to send in these units. Now, he knows that the Protoss player has Void Rays, but the Protoss player doesn't have very many gateway units. And he's going to go straight for this Nexus. And I mean, luckily, planetary or photon overcharge does go down, which is, not always the case, because sometimes the Nexus gets denied before it, even finishes. And these Roaches are going to get cleaned up, mostly because the Zerg player decided to go to the 3rd instead of trying to, brute down the main. If he had gone for the main, he might have been able to take out the Cybernetics Core, or this Forge, or this Gateway. That could have been a real big problem, because then you can stream in Lings really forever. But the Protoss player is going to clean this up just by, warping in a few sentries, force fielding. Okay, and that is basically how you defend this. But and it happened very fast, so I'm just going to pause the game and explain to you what I really want to stress. Okay, there's a few things that need to be noted. First of all, Mothership Core needs to be in a position where it can quickly photon overcharge in the relevant Nexus. That's going to be either the 3rd or the main. The Mothership Core should be like somewhere here, or like with one's army. Secondly, the Void Rays, you shouldn't be hiding them at this point. They need to be, again, in a place where they can quickly be pulled into battle. Because this Nexus, okay, if this Nexus gets killed, it doesn't really matter how many units the Zerg loses, because, I mean, if it doesn't mine, then you're not going to be able to continue to produce Void Rays, and you're not going to be able to get Colossi at the same time. So you're not going to be able to really get that army you want. Meanwhile, if your Void Rays are here already, then they have that much more time to, start killing the Zerglings and the Roaches, and, just the sheer number of Zerg units is really just requires as much time as possible for a unit like Void Rays to kill. Okay, furthermore, you want to be continuing to make the stuff you've committed to behind this. Okay, getting Colossi out is imperative. You have to get Colossi out because Hydralisks will be coming sooner or later. And if you do not get Colossi started, then you will be in a position where you don't have enough Colossi or Thermal Lance in time to deal with the initial Hydralisk swell. And that's going to end up letting you lose your third base and maybe even the main, because Hydralisks are pretty good against Gateway units and Void Rays. So basically the key to this is positioning your army properly. And the real things you have to rely on are the effectiveness of that Photon Overcharge, the effectiveness of that Void Ray charge against roaches only, and also, you have to be warping in Zealots. Now, do not bother really warping in Stalkers against this kind of pressure. Even though you have very low gateway count, you will eventually have, be up to 3 once the 2 in the main finish. But you shouldn't be really warping Stalkers against this composition because they're not really going to do anything. You want to be warping Zealots mostly because you don't have the gas to warp a lot of sentries since you're going for Colossi behind this and continuing to make Stargate units to some extent. You want to go Zealots to clean up the Lings because the Void Rays are good against the Roaches. The charge will kill them very, very quickly, but the Zerglings are so cheap and so numerous, and they take a while to just kind of kill them. Even though they're so weak, there's just so many of them that it just takes a while to get them all down. And they do actually have quite a bit of DPS for their cost, so they can really just do a lot of damage to a Nexus very quickly, and it takes quite a bit of time to kill them. So that's why you want to be warping in Zealots. Now the reason that the only time you should be warping in Sentries is in a situation like this. If they start going for your main, you need Sentries to stop them from getting in your base. If they get in your base and start killing probes and stuff, I mean, it's just not good in any sense, because it's not so much that you'll necessarily take a lot of damage as it is that you'll probably end up losing concentration and slipping up on your build. You might forget to get extended thermal lance, you might stop macroing, you might stop adding gateways, you might cut probes, you might never saturate these gases, so on and so forth. Basically, if stuff gets in your base, then you're sort of being exposed. So basically, I just wanted to touch on, how to use a greedy build, which, obviously gets stronger if you can pull it off, but how to really take advantage of positioning to make this kind of build work, even against a player who scouts it fairly early and actually does try to pressure. So I hope you enjoyed this replay. Feel free to check out our existing library of strategies, tips, and more, and we'll see you next time.